Well, looks like it's time to jump into an old favorite video idea from last year, proving that the actual worst weapon in Dark Souls is better than anyone might have ever expected. I mean, we already tapped that vein by re-upping the Yhorm straight sword run this summer, and boy was that illuminating for how incredibly goated that weapon became in the sequel. Now, for the task at hand today, I've tried this in DS1 and saw that the worst weapon is better than it has any right to be. Which brings us to our current test, where I'm looking to see if the same can be said for DS3. Surprisingly enough, the game that further emphasizes fast-paced combat and even more stat number go up gives some unique challenges to this run that weren't present in the original. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and ask that question and get to the answering. Can you beat Dark Souls 3 with the broken straight sword? Well, Iudex Gundyr doesn't go well without a weapon, since we don't actually start with the broken straight sword this time. There are a few ways to kill Gundyr without one, but we go for the firebomb method here. I tried to go fist only, but phase 2 moves from difficult to nearly impossible. And this isn't the point of this run anyway, so Black Firebomb starting gift, unarmed parry and firebomb to death, then we make our way through the cemetery to find our proper weapon, the broken straight sword. Not quite the same as the old straight sword hilt, but equally as terrible, and for all the same reasons. Terrible range, abysmal scaling, and a base damage that barely improves from +0 to +10. But it can't possibly be that bad, right? Well, let's test that against the first real boss of this run, Vordt. Well, that may bode ill for the remainder of our run, now won't it? But it's half a busted sword, and we don't have access to the major buffs that will hopefully carry us through the rest of the game. What we do have access to right now is a couple lightning pine resins. Is that enough for me to actually click with this fight? No. But it does teach me that, at least for now, if I want to deal real damage, then charge R2s are the way to go against Vordt. It's not good damage, but it's honest work, and it sees us through. Now, the next boss might be the curse-rotten Greatwood. That certainly isn't the next place we'll be going. After Vordt, quite a few places suddenly become available. These include the Undead Settlement, the Crucifixion Woods or Road of Sacrifice, and Farron Keep. Technically, some of these locations need to be run through to get to others, but there's at least no bosses stopping progress. This path can then get us access to a few things. First, we can meet Sigvard and start him on his questline. Surprisingly enough, we actually don't have much trouble against the demon here that drops the fire gem. I say surprising because the last few attempts I've had, I've died on this dude like a dozen times on each run. But for the broken straight sword, somehow we're able to get through this fight fine. Very strange. Once we're through this section, we also pick up the Flynn's ring and the Chloranthy ring, which will increase our damage as long as our equip load is low and increase stamina recovery, respectively. Side note, the equip load is not based on the overall equip percentage, but the actual amount of weight in total. So raising vitality or grabbing the Havel's ring won't give us any more AR from Flynn's ring. Further along, we also pick up the Grasscrest Shield and Orbeck in the Crucifixion Woods. I will be failing the Orbeck questline for even better dabblage later on, but more on that later. For now, we head back to Firelink and buy magic weapon from him, then head back into Farron Keep. Here, we can pick up the Dream Chaser's ashes in order to get access to unlimited Titanite shards, which will not only help us get our broken straight sword up to +3, but will also let us work on getting our spell catalyst up to the same as we start working on the build. We also find Great Magic Weapon while we're here, which immediately replaces the one we bought from Orbeck. Cool. And finally, on the trips through these areas, we've also gotten the ability to give our broken straight sword the raw treatment, which makes it more powerful than our scaling would ever have been able to make it, while retaining the ability to apply buffs. Seriously, raw is actually pretty sick in DS3, major improvement over DS1. Haven't tried it enough in DS2 to make a specific call out on that, but like all good things in DS3, it probably came from DS2. With all of that finished, oh, and a few Undead Bone and Estus shards picked up, we can finally get to the boss at the top of this section in my notes, the Curse-Rotten Greatwood. This one has gone better before, especially in that bow-only run. Bows tear this thing apart, in fact. But that's not necessarily to say that the Broken Straight Sword is really all that bad here. Sure, it takes a few hits to properly pop the pimples, and the short range of the weapon make actually landing blows a bit more difficult, but it really isn't all that terrible. It's like a +0 dagger, I guess, at this point, even though it's already +3. We are still showing the same damage output issues that had us struggling on Vordt though, but running through to pop each sack is simple enough to even out that added difficulty. On our way to the next fight, we also kill the Stray Demon. Different Stray, who this time shows the fading of fire and chaos as it has become a dried husk with no flame remaining. One interesting note here is that this Stray also gets the same leg failing effect as Lawrence in Bloodborne. I wouldn't point this out if I saw this more often, but I usually kill this guy so quick that I rarely see this and totally forgot about the leg breaking before now. Point of all of this was to get the Havel's Ring, by the way, hoping to alter my equip load and increase the Flynn's Ring buff. That's how I learned that the ring's buff is based on total weight and not the equip load percentage. With that done though, we can head on to the Crystal Sage. Not gonna lie, this boss is kind of a miss for me. Not a huge fan of the constant teleporting and getting ganked by RNG on what attacks the clones decide to do. So this takes a few attempts, but yeah, the Broken Straight Sword isn't really the biggest issue, since you kind of have to get in there really close with the Crystal Sage to hit it anyway. The damage here is fine, but it does come a little short on stagger power, which means it takes about 2 hits to start up the combo that holds the Sage in place instead of 1. After getting over that hurdle though, we're good, and it only takes about 3 tries in total to get through the fight. The Cathedral of the Deep itself doesn't do much to throw us, mostly because this area is very easy to run straight through from start to finish without killing anything. What does manage to cause issue with our terrible weapon, you might ask? Well, the Deacons of the Deep. This is an odd fight. I feel like every time I take a strange weapon into it, the fight proves itself to be much more difficult than I ever would have expected. However, in this case, I don't have the DPS of the claws to chew through the crowd like a wall of meat, or the pinpoint precision of the bow to shoot the main deacons between all of his followers, or on a more casual playthrough, the crowd control of something like a greatsword to knock the group away and bat them around. Instead, all we have is some minor damage in order to run in, slap the target deacon, then run out. We also can't even fully stop the cursing attacks. Instead, we need to backstab the tall guys in order to break them out of their animation to draw curse out of Aldrich's tomb and stall that buildup. It takes a lot of tries, but the eventual winning strategy is to run around the back of the tomb in order to draw the group out in one direction or another, separate the main deacon, then run in and get some damage in. After a very long, drawn-out fight, we get our win, for a lot more trouble than I might have initially guessed. Speaking of trouble, we've got probably the worst fight of this entire run coming up. Although that's hard to say. A lot of them are rough. So, the Abyss Watchers took multiple days to get through, which usually means that it was the last thing I did on a specific day of gathering footage, but still. Always sucks to go to bed on a loss like that, and that tends to make these fights feel like the most miserable experiences. The major problem in this fight is certainly in the low damage, but also definitely the lack of range, which really shows here since the Watchers dodge so often. That can be a difficulty for a lot of weapons, dealing with the mobility of the Watchers, but the Broken Straight Sword specifically seems to fall into the trap of missing more than a lot of the other longer swords that I tend to use when fighting these guys. However, above all else, the biggest disappointment in this fight isn't even that it's tough to get to the end, but how many times I simply fail to cross that finish line. It is especially demoralizing to be within a single hit of victory and then choke right at the end, over and over. But if there is one thing I am, it's greedy. But if there is a second thing that I am, it's determined, persistent even. And so I do exactly that, and eventually, even the Abyss Watchers can't stand up against persistence. Alright, Abyss Watchers are finally down. Time to go make a mistake. But not an incredibly relevant one, but still a mistake nonetheless. because it's time to go kill the old Demon King before Wolnir, which means that we won't have him for an easy boss to kill before Siegward moves on after meeting him in Irithyll and killing Pontiff Sulyvahn. All the same, this goes pretty well, but not because of the weapon, or the greater magic weapon buff on it. It's because old Demon King is extremely simple once you have a minor understanding of his dodge timings. So while it might be a long fight, since our damage is still pretty bad, it isn't exactly a difficult one to make it through to the end. I won't lie, I was worried about the Wolnir fight, and yet this is one of the simpler encounters that I've had against this guy in previous runs. Like, I think I died more with the goated Astora's Straightsword than I did with this broken chunk of rusting steel. Sure, the damage is much worse here, and it takes nearly 2 full combos to break each bracelet, but it looks like more than anything, the RNG is really in my favor today. Like, it didn't feel like it at the time, since he does a bunch of the attacks that stall out the fight like crazy, but he never bothers with his most dangerous options. The crawl, or the mist spray, or even summoning skeletons. Instead, he moves straight to summoning that sword of his and trying to bash me to death with it, which are some of the easier moves to dodge. And even if I do fumble, his attacks aren't exactly combos, it's more one hit at a time, and they don't one-shot me right away. So I'm never really in all that much danger throughout the fight. GG easy, I guess. Thanks for the good luck. Next up is a semi-early run at Dancer, mostly to save Grey Rat since I killed old Demon King a touch too early. Normally I reverse the order of him and Wolnir, making sure to kill old Demon King after reaching Irithyll in order to make sure that Siegward saves our goodest boy. So instead, we're heading to Dancer about 3 bosses early. So we really aren't unprepared or underprepared here. We're roughly at the level we should be anyway, and I've made myself a healthy enough boy to take at least a few hits. In fact, while this fight plays out, let's chat about the specificity of the build. So we've hit the first soft cap on Vigor already, which is somewhere around the 30s, but it's still worth it to shove levels into the 40s where the second soft cap is. Meanwhile, we've been pumping everything else into Intelligence, since all of our bonus damage is coming from the spell buff on Greater Magic Weapon. Another major benefit of the raw weapons, since it lets us dump everything else into the Int and Faith stats to bolster a Battle Mage or Paladin build. Unfortunately, our Battle Mage can only cast a single buff, but it's at least better than the raw damage on the Broken Straightsword alone. And as we can see, the build works, keeping us alive long enough to take out Dancer on our first attempt. We spend a little time in Lothric Castle now as a result of having fought Dancer early and pick up some Titanite chunks while we're here. We even kill the dragons and work our way to the Dragonslayer Armor. But we won't actually be challenging him yet, since there's no point in fighting him now without a way into the Grand Archives behind him anyway. So instead, we continue Siegward's questline in order to grab ourselves the Titanite slab he gives us, which can combine with those chunks we found to get our Broken Straightsword up to plus 10. The level bonuses aren't much, but every little bit of extra AR does add up, so we'll take it. Oh, and look at that. As a result of grabbing that slab, Siegward joins us for the Yhorm fight. Oh no! He's killing Yhorm basically by himself. Aw, nuts, man. And I was looking forward to spending 6 hours chipping at this guy's ankles. Well, guess we'll give this one to Siegward and move on. Shucks, maybe next time. Well, if we were disappointed about not getting a real fight out of Yhorm, then congratulations! Sulyvahn whoops my ass for a couple hours. Like, really, really badly. I mean, we get a few close calls right away. In fact, I would have gotten him on my first try, but he 1 HP and adrened me when I thought he'd call for the Mimic tier, causing me to panic roll his deadliest combo, which naturally wiped the floor with me. Yeah, note on that attack, distance is your friend. Actually trying to time every single dodge is a bit of a nightmare. Like, it can definitely be done by anyone with a better internal metronome and has really studied the exact rhythm, but if you're not a perfect no-hitter, then back off and keep running until he stops. Don't do as I did and try to actually dodge all of these hits in real time, only to die with a single hit left. Anyway, this is not the last boss who will kick my ass when I'm 1 hit away from victory, but this is certainly the most demoralizing since the Abyss Watchers. But, once again, determination wins the day. and we make it through. With Sulyvahn gone, we can head through Enerlando, get married, and make our way to fight Aldrich. This is an odd fight since I really haven't had a lot of trouble against Aldrich in the last few attempts against him, after learning about the standing under the statues method for the arrow swarm in the second phase. Otherwise, that attack is an instant kill for so many builds. Honestly, kinda crazy that it shipped. Either way, while we never get quite as close as we did against Sulyvahn and the Watchers in the failed runs, Aldrich does manage to kick me right in the dick multiple times before I measure my spacing and make sure not to get overwhelmed by those passive spell balls he likes to summon between teleports. Difficult he might be though, we continue to persist. And now that we've been properly summoned to fight Dancer, only with Dancer already dead, we can head back into the castle proper and get into the Dragonslayer Armor fight. I really do love this guy. It's one of my favorites in DS3, and the Broken Straight Sword is barely even a hindrance in it. Hell, the only thing that actually kills me isn't being drained down through all of my Estus because I lack the damage to finish the fight quickly, but a few mistimed dodges that end up catching me on his strongest attacks and basically one-shotting me because of the instability or counter damage or whatever. I think it's instability here since I was mid-dodge, not mid-attack. Otherwise, this is a perfectly reasonable fight. I'm able to get in, get my combos off, get out, and maintain a pretty decent pace against this reanimated husk of Ornstein's old armor. Great fight, no notes. Now that we have access to the Grand Archives, we can do the normal things like die to the Crystal Sage and other little shitheads all inside of the archives, but then finally get our kill and be rewarded with the Crystal Scroll. Too bad I hadn't given Orbeck any scrolls at all at this point, and therefore lost the chance to give him this one, and also lost the chance to get the best magic weapon buff, Crystal Magic Weapon. Yeah, sometimes I don't like FromSoft's obtuse design decisions. Not gonna lie, I understand the "what's he gonna do, wait around forever" argument as if he has any agency, but he's ones and zeros stuffed inside of a human-shaped wire mesh with a bunch of skin-colored textures over it. Yeah, he absolutely should sit and wait for me to be ready to use him as the merchant that I need. Okay, mini rant over, let's get to the actual boss of the area. The Twin Princes, Lothric and Lorien. So I've learned something about my feelings on DS3 with some of the runs I've been diving into over the last few months. And that is that I really don't like Lorien. He's okay in concept, and the gimmick of him teleporting around is neat on paper. But damn if there isn't enough of a tell for where the hell he's going to be and what attack he's going to do after he warps out. The result is a pretty drawn-out fight and plenty of attempts before we get the win, but we give Lothric his backshots while he's still riding Lorien and move on from one of the toughest mandatory bosses in the whole fucking game. Speaking of mandatory, let's go clean up some of the optional stuff. How is that speaking of? I don't think I used that phrase right. Let's start, of course, with Oceiros, because he's actually the first one we have to fight in order to open up the others. Honestly, I know that this guy gets a lot of complaints from the community, mostly because of those charging attacks that have very little telegraph and deal extreme amounts of damage, but I really haven't had a whole lot of trouble with him since adding DS3 to the Challenge Run repertoire this year. He's certainly not easy, but he's plenty predictable, and everything aside from the charge does have a very open telegraph that gives all the hint we need to get the fuck out of there. I will say that probably has to do with the speed of many of my most recent weapons I've taken in to fight him, since getting a combo off with the Broken Straight Sword doesn't really leave me completely open as much as some of the bigger, slower weapons I tend to gravitate to in more casual playthroughs often do. Altogether, not the worst fight in the world. Champion Gundyr, on the other hand, is the worst fight in the world. I mean, not really, but it worked well for the transition, right? This guy is my complete foil, though. He has these long, drawn-out telegraphs. Honestly, I don't know why Nameless King is the poster child for pre-Elden Ring delayed attacks, since this guy waits half a year before throwing half of his shots out. Can redirect on a dime to catch me whenever I try to get better positioning with my dodges, and his combos never fucking end. When's it gonna be my turn, damn it? Another extremely difficult fight, but once again, through each reset, revive, and the deaths that bring us to them, we persist. And the champion, finally, goes down. This then takes us to Archdragon Peak, where we meet the Ancient Imposter. You are no true Drake. Fire cannot kill a dragon. Should probably watch past season 2 of that show. I hear it gets way better towards the end. And we make it to the actual star of the show for this area, the Nameless King. But before we can fight the king himself, we need to first spend 5 minutes taking down King of the Storm. Yeah, 5 minutes on phase 1. Awesome. Love the idea of doing this again if I... Yeah. That. So that was piddly damage against Nameless. You know, I like this fight and all, but fuck this. The point is proved. Right? Right? Proc? What are you doing? Why are you going back? Yeah, piddly damage isn't no damage. And if it bleeds, then we can kill it. So, one more time, with gusto, we respec, calling on a paladin build to give us the damage we need, and we persist. And then there was one. Soul of Cinder time, and damn do I need to put some respect on this man's name. Previous runs against this guy not too long ago gave me a false sense of security against Soul of Cinder. Not sure if it was the Astora Straight Sword or the Claw Run or what, but I got an idea that this guy was somehow really manageable and easy. Somehow I've completely forgotten that it took me like 6 hours to beat him on my first playthrough, with an honestly terrible sorcery build at the time. But yeah, with the Broken Straight Sword, I see exactly what the difficulty back then was. Without massive damage to power through the fight before he could really push me, or stagger potential to keep him on his knees, the Soul of Cinder is a powerhouse that really earns his spot as the final boss of DS3. All of that said, even he can't stand to the force that is our determination. So, is the Broken Straight Sword as strangely usable and even good on occasions as it was back in DS1? Well, somehow this is a yes and a no. Like, the weapon actually has stats and scaling now in a way that makes sense. But the no comes from a simple fact of DS3's design over that of DS1's. The numbers here are way fucking higher. And as a result, the buffs have comparatively less of an effect than back in DS1. Where the DS1 buffs could carry a weapon with almost no AR of its own to speak of, DS3 is much more balanced to make sure that everything from resins to spell buffs is exactly the supplement they are meant to be, rather than the key to some explosively powerful build that even brings the Broken Straight Sword's stats high enough to out-DPS the Four Kings. There were, admittedly, some pathing issues here too, and a Faith build turned out to lead to some better successes than the It build did, especially since I borked the Orbeck questline. In fact, you'll notice that I still used Int against Soul of Cinder, because beating him and Nameless was a bit out of order for the sake of keeping the flow of the video going strong. Likewise, I did attempt to take this into the DLC, but after spending 20 minutes fighting Frida only to die halfway through the Black Flame phase, I tapped out. Don't get me wrong, it can be done, but the whole time I was down there, all I could think about was moving on to the next video already. It's part of the reason why this video took a week to come out, in fact. Some of these fights took entire days to get through. Not because they were too hard, but because they were simply that long for each attempt. So yeah, threw in the towel there. Because while the Broken Straight Sword is better than you might expect, the weapon's range, moveset, and overall stats, even when buffed, leave a lot to be desired. But hey, we still got an ending with it, so that's good enough for me. Hey, it's that time again. The end of the video where I invite folks to come check out the Patreon. Link in the description, and make good on the rewards for those currently pledged. Patreon members get early access to new content and their names written in the credits at the end of videos. And those who pledge in the top tiers get their names read out, like our DevBox designers, Genghis Braun, and our DevBox developers, Azul. Thanks for your support, and thanks for watching.